I'm sitting here with Nick Tassone at Attic Studios, and he does production and editing for my podcast, Workforce Energy Management. And we're here to talk about a topic and a subject that's just becoming a lot more prevalent in this kind of changing world and what people are looking for, and that's energy. So it's naturally that we got into this discussion about flow state. And me and Nick were talking about this as I recorded podcasts, that if I'm going and I'm recording episodes, to just keep going, just keep recording episodes, because it takes so much energy to get into that. And that was our first discussion on flow state. And so I wanted to do this episode because that's probably the favorite part of people's programs is flow state. And it's because everyone knows that feeling where you kind of lose track of time and you get home and you're still energized and you're thinking about it, but it's not exhausting. And my understanding of flow state is it's where skills meet the right amount of challenge, right? You're not bored, you're not overwhelmed, you're like in the zone. But from Nick's creative process, how he described it makes so much sense as I started guiding clients on this redesign of what does our environment look like? What does the flow look like between people? And so I've been picking Nick's brain, and I brought him on to the show to really figure out how can we guide through change and still maintain this innovation and creativity through flow state. So as a producer, as a musician, what is flow state to you? Because I understand it from the workforce side, but what is flow state to you?
Well, I like the way that you kind of introduced it, that it's like everyone knows it and everyone recognizes that it feels really good when you're in it, right? It feels good to do work. Like you said, you're motivated, you're energized, you don't feel exhausted at the end of the day, compared to if you're just like pushing through and working not in a flow state.
So I know it from the workforce side, but you've talked about sessions where you go 16 hours with another musician and then you guys show up the next day and you're like so excited to continue on. That wouldn't happen in the workforce so much. So I'm trying to channel that type of flow state. So from a producer, from a musician type of view, what is flow state?
A lot of people will notice that like, oh my gosh, the time just flew by. Like, where did the time go? I used to teach in schools, and a lot of times when students were like learning in flow, or like when they're in that flow state, class would end, the bell would ring, they'd be like, wait, what? It's done already? You know, like you're not sitting there looking at the clock, right? You're not checking your watch every couple seconds because you don't care about the time. You care about what you're doing. So you're so fully engaged in what's happening that you don't have all these barriers of like, oh, am I getting exhausted? How much time do we have left? What am I going to do tonight after I'm done with this? Like if you're focused on what you're doing and you're totally present, it's really easy to do that kind of work for a long period of time. And it feels good when you're done too.
Yeah. So as I've been guiding clients, trying to get them unstuck from these traditional ways and finding this flow within their team and in their space, the hardest part is getting them unstuck. And I'm sitting here in a beautiful music studio, intentionally built. There's guitars, a marimba, there's drums, electric guitar, piano, synth. And so you're set up, right? But I know that you didn't always have this space. So is flow that just happens like in any space, or do you have to design it? Explain a little bit more about the setup of flow.
Sure. So this is kind of the tricky thing. I think this is what people struggle with is you can create flow, or like you can naturally let it happen. It does naturally happen. Okay. That's what people get stuck on is you can't create flow. You can't force yourself into a flow state. You can't sit down and be like, okay, I've got this work to do. Let's get into a flow state and let's go. You can't make it happen. You need to let it happen. Okay. But the thing is, it will naturally happen if you let it and if you get all these other things out of the way. So in my working experience, like what I have found is if I need to be creative, if I need to do something like, writing music or like thinking creatively, some kind of brainstorming thing, I do that best right away in the morning, like right when I wake up. So if I know that I have that work that I have to do, if I can do that right when I wake up in the morning, I know I will be at my most creative. This room over time, I mean, this has just kind of evolved based on how I know I work. My recording has started as me recording myself. So this room is built around where do I need things in order for me to work efficiently? So when I talk about getting rid of barriers, if I have to plug things in or set up microphones every time I want to record the drums, that's a barrier. That's going to take time. It's going to take me out of the flow state. Like if I have an idea, I want to act on it right away. I want to be present with it and not have all these other barriers. So if I can have the microphones already set up on the drums, all I have to do is just like hit record, go back and play the drums. And the flow state continues, right? So it's not about creating the flow state or forcing it to happen. It's basically removing the barriers, like recognizing what the barriers might be and then getting rid of them, so that you can just go. You can just follow the train of thought, follow the flow.
Yeah. So that's in relation to working on your own, which many of us do. But then when you have to work with others, that's an added layer, right? So when you bring a band in, that's your team that you have to work with. How do you go about designing that flow, especially when you maybe not even, you don't know them that well?
Sure. Yeah, that can be tricky. Again, going back to the removing barriers thing. So just having microphones available and like just kind of things ready to go so that I can, quick grab, so that again, we don't have to kill the flow if it happens. Again, I can't create the flow in that situation, but if it's happening, I don't want to have to stop it for some reason. Another part of that, I think, as like a producer, and this would be maybe similar to like a manager or someone in kind of like a managing position where they're guiding a team through things, is being able to recognize flow state in other people and how, like, recognize if people are working in flow state, and how you can keep that going. So when you're recording someone else, there's different ways of doing it. Sometimes you might recognize that a band is going to work best. They're going to create their best music if they can play together all at the same time. And I need to recognize that. You might recognize in a team, they're going to do their best work if they're all working together actively at the same time in the same room, communication is happening, etc. And so I need to not get in the way of that. I need to not say, nope, we're going to do it my way. Let's do things one instrument at a time. I need to make a space where they can do that, right? Create the space that allows the flow. Other musicians aren't going to create the best recording they can in that group scenario. They'll do better if they can isolate their part and do it just themselves, right? And they can really focus on it for a long time. Other people are like that in their work too, right? Like some people like working together, some people like working over a long period of time on their own, focused on one thing. When I have a musician in here and they're playing their part, sometimes you can get the best take out of them by just having them rapid fire, repeat, play the same thing over and over and over again. And if that's conducive to them being in a flow state, I need to recognize that and then do that with them, right? But I also need to recognize that that can really quickly burn some people out. If they are doing the same thing over and over and over and it's not going well, they can get in their own head and be like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I'm terrible. I don't know what I'm doing. I should just give up music altogether. What am I even doing here?
It's like the spiral.
Yeah. So you don't want to force that to happen, right? So you need to recognize if that's about to happen or if it's starting to happen, stop that, figure out a different process, right? Take a break. Try to think more big picture, and is there something else that like you can take a break on this for a little bit and work on something else for a while? Maybe for that person to be in that flow state, they need a break and they need to just not be doing that, or they need to do it in a different way. I have the ability to like mute and solo different things. So maybe you're playing the guitar track and the bass track is confusing you. So I need to get rid of that, get rid of the distraction so you can focus just on the one thing that's helping you play your part. So again, it I guess is coming back to removing distractions and removing barriers, right? And allowing the person to work as naturally and in that flow state as possible.
Yeah. So I can already hear where time gets away from you. Because you want to honor flow state, but also that can take time, and that's always an issue wherever you are, whether you're creating or in the studio or at work. So how do you go about like hitting deadlines? Obviously, musicians can't be in here for 24 hours. And like you said, there's a point that you reach where you're almost making it worse. Mm-hmm. And so you have to stop. So how do you go about maintaining this flow state, giving space for that, and then still hitting a deadline or a timeline?
So I feel like that has to do with just kind of respecting and knowing where you're at. Or like knowing where your team is at. Maybe your goal is we need to achieve this outcome by the end of the meeting, or in music, we need to have this recording done by the end of the day, or whatever it is, hypothetically. As much as you hate to say it, like you are only so good as a musician, like you are only as good as you are. Okay. So if your expectation is to create something by the end of the day that you are not capable of, what is more time going to, like adding more time isn't necessarily going to help. Actually, maybe switching over to when I was teaching, I would see this in the classroom too. So like some students would get a test done in, the amount of time that most students would get their test done. Other students would be like, I just need more time. I just need more time. But if you keep giving them time, they would take an extra hour or two to finish that test, and they're not actually doing anything. They don't know what they're doing. They're stuck. Okay. So adding that extra time isn't going to accomplish anything. If you think about a team, forcing the team to work longer on something, or like letting the meeting run over because you're maybe, recognizing, oh, we're in the flow state, let's just keep this going. I mean, that's great. But yeah, if you take it too far, you're not being productive and you're not getting the best work out of your employees. You're not getting the best music out of your musicians if you push them too far, right? So recognize like, what can we reasonably get done in this time? And maybe surprise yourself for the better if you can get more done, because you can enter that flow state and you can work really effectively, really efficiently. Maybe you get more done than you expected, but don't have unrealistic expectations that you can't meet, and then you don't meet them, and then you say, well, we just need to keep working on this longer. We need to make this meeting run over or whatever. Yeah,
I think that's extremely relevant, because I think sometimes we go into meetings trying to solve everything and we don't even know the root cause. So we're not prepared. We don't really know what we're trying to solve truly, and then we're surprised when the meeting runs over and people are confused, and we meet. So sometimes it's okay to take a chunk of that and say, we're going to meet to figure out what we need to do. So in like your case, a band needs to know what they're in the studio for. Mm-hmm. We're not figuring out the songs in the studio. You're prepared for it. And I feel like in the workforce, if we approached that to say we can have the best flow if everyone is prepared, so that means there's a purpose. That means the root cause is already identified, or the goal that we want to get to. And then everyone is prepared when they come in, because we talked about earlier about the environmental, about understanding one another and when they need to switch out or pivot a little bit. And I think if, say, you have 3 team members in a meeting, they're working towards something, and one person is not prepared, the flow is already slightly misdesigned, right? It's the hurdle.
Yeah, I can add to that too, that recognizing that group flow and individual flow are different things, and you can't necessarily treat them both the same. There's research on group flow, and it's not necessarily the same as individual flow. And recognizing, so let's use the music in the studio example, okay? You might have a musician who is part of a band, but they come in here and they're doing their part individually, and they are in a flow state, right? They just want to keep going. They're like, this is great. I'm playing so well right now. I need to keep playing my parts. But if you just let that go, that person might get all of their parts done that day, but then no one else gets a chance to record anything. And that's kind of detrimental to the whole group flow, or the group's outcome. Like what they want is they want the full song. They want the band to be recorded, not just one person. And yeah, maybe that one person was in a flow state, and that's awesome. Great. We got that person there. But we don't want to be detrimental to the bigger picture, right? And the group flow. And so if you think about like in an organization, right? Like you might have one small team that's working on something, and you might be in a good flow of whatever you're doing in that meeting or whatever. But that meeting, whatever you're trying to accomplish, that's one small part of the bigger company's goals, right? And the company is trying to achieve their goals over a certain timeline. And you can contribute to that big company flow by making sure all these little pieces are moving along as well, right? And if one piece is taking too long because they think they're more important or they need to do their work, then that's going to be detrimental to something else that needs to follow right after that, right? And so now we're being detrimental to the whole group. So group flow is way more complex than just individual, because now we're looking at like how one person is like entering that flow state or like working in it, but then also alongside someone else, and their pacing might be different. Their work styles might be different. And so those two people working in flow together, or a group of people working in flow together, doesn't necessarily mean all of those people being in flow state individually.
That's interesting that you say individual and team, because when I build programs with clients and we talk about the leadership program, and then I mentioned leadership coaching, it seems like that is a barrier in our conversation. And I've said similar things. As a group, we will be moving forward, but as an individual, they will have their own barriers that might not be related to the group. And certainly I'm not going to bring things up, if I was in a group leadership thing that I really need to work on, or I'm having trouble with, or maybe I'm even having trouble with another leader in my group. But when I can get individual coaching, I can attack that. So I love the whole theme of this flow state has just been around identifying the hurdles and barriers and removing those to get into flow state. So there's moments where like you kind of feel it, right? And you're getting into it, or you're getting into that deep work and that's going to lead you into this flow state where you're going to lose track of time, get things done, but you feel good. You feel so good after. I mean, what do we do to ourselves, or environmental factors that like keep us from continuing in flow? Because sometimes the opportunity's there and we don't take it.
I think part of that is, I mean, I hate to say it, but kind of societally, we've been trained against it. All of our schooling is not necessarily designed to like make flow state happen or let students work in a flow state. It's very rigid. And I mean, if you think just like, even if you don't know anything about flow state, just think about words, right? Like rigidity is going to block flow, right? And so rigid schedules, rigid timelines are going to block flow. And sometimes that's fine. Like flow is not like the answer to everything in life. So it doesn't need to be the end goal for everything. Sometimes we need to just move on. But I think we're so used to thinking that like, oh, if I'm going to be productive, like feeling a flow state doesn't have anything to do with it, because we're so used to how school felt and how it felt to be productive in school. But flow state is a natural thing, and most people have experienced it, but they only usually experience it in like play or fun type situations. You know, like maybe someone goes golfing and they love golfing and the day just flies by and they're like, man, where did the time go? Because you're not thinking about time when you're golfing. You're just golfing, or you're enjoying the company that you're with, right? You're doing the thing. You're in flow state because you're present in the moment doing the activity. Yeah, so we really only experience like this flow state when we're doing like hobby type things, and we don't really see it as something that is relevant in like a workplace or a work situation. But it's just a natural thing. It's a natural feeling. It's a natural way of doing things. So it can happen in work. It's just we're not used to seeing it that way. And I guess to add on to that, I think recently there's been a lot more attention on flow state, like in our culture or just like society, like people are hearing more about it. And it's starting to sound less like this woo magic weird thing, you know, like it's just it's a normal thing. But yeah, so raising people's awareness of it too. I think some people may have never even heard of it or thought of it, or like maybe they can recognize the feeling, but they didn't know that like this is a legitimate thing. This is an experience that people have, that other, you know, people can have every day if they want to or whatever.
Yeah, and that's where it came from. When I started mentioning flow state in programs, everyone's like, what is that? And then I explained the feeling of it. And like you said, everyone's experienced it. I think with the busyness of life, sometimes we just have distracted away from it or pushed on to the next thing instead of allowing it. And a great example is I'm a stickler for meetings, right? It's my number one pet peeve. It's what I continue to talk about on the podcast and YouTube and my social media. And it's a big pet peeve of many clients. And so I continue on with it. But there is a sweet spot in meetings where, yes, you have a 45-minute meeting, but if you are in flow and you know, like, we're probably going to get to the next step or close this out or have a big moment, it's okay to run 5 minutes over. Mm-hmm. Like people shouldn't just start leaving but this is a flow state, not the chit chat, the gossip, the black hole conversations. I'm talking like you are in it. You know, we are almost there. Cause it feels so good when you walk out of a room, sign off from that meeting, and you did it. You like made the breakthrough, had the big idea, had the epiphany, the aha moment. It's a whole different feeling, and that's the flow, right? You've completed the flow cycle kind of thing, versus like, oh, we're at 45 minutes, we need to be done. And so it's interesting. I think the more that you can recognize the hurdles, what does flow look like for an individual, what does flow look like for a team, you can identify when certain situations like meetings are being derailed and when you're in flow, mm-hmm. and if it's worth the extra 5 minutes.
And also, when is it relevant to try to be in a flow state? Because again, it's not like the answer for everything, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like sometimes you just got to get stuff done, right? Or it doesn't need the creative juice. It's just something that we have to do, the task. It's more of the creative process and allowing to either recreate something new or design something that hasn't been, or just be present enough to be feeding that energy back and forth, mm-hmm. To allow that. And I think there's a big difference too in what you were talking about, the design of a room and the environment of the people when I do leadership trainings on site versus off site. right? Offsite, they are engaged. They are in flow state faster because they don't have the distractions, the hurdles of the day-to-day happening. When we do it in the plants or in the facilities, in the shops, there's constant distractions. And I feel like it takes a lot more energy to get into that flow state and that ease of discussion. So where can people find your work, explore your services?
You can check out my website. I've got music on Spotify, YouTube, all the streaming services. I've got lots of videos on YouTube. Teach on like educational stuff, so teaching guitar and bass and drums, how to record and mix things, as well as just like straight up music. Just, that's what I'm in the business for, is making music. So I've got plenty of my own music, other people's music out there as well.
Great. Thanks for having me in the studio. Yeah.